When we were prepping for this deep dive,
Hmm.
the headline alone, I got to say, sent a chill right down my spine. An
Yeah.
assassination attempt on NY former president,
Right.
it's a huge deal.
It's huge.
But this being the second time someone's allegedly targeted former President Trump in just months,
Yeah.
I mean, that's unheard of, right?
Well, and what's so fascinating to me is that it's not just talk this time, right? This isn't a threat we're hearing shouted at a rally. It's not just an online post, We have an actual suspect,
Right.
Ryan Wesley Ruth,
Like,
apprehended with a rifle
yeah.
just yards away from the former president.
It's chilling. It
Yeah.
really is. And honestly, what's gotten me about this case, even more than the attempt itself,
Yeah.
is the suspect's background.
Mm.
This isn't what you'd expect. Like there's no clear extremist profile, no obvious motive screaming at us.
Right.
This is where it gets really interesting and honestly a lot more unsettling.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this case, it really defies those easy answers I think a lot of us are looking for when we see these sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
We want to categorize to understand the why by pointing to a clear ideology or affiliation, right? This person believes this, therefore.
Right.
But with Ruth, it's murky.
It is murky. So
Yeah.
walk us through it. What do we actually know about this guy?
Yeah.
Because the AP article paints, well, it's a strange picture, right? I mean, running a shed building business with his son in Hawaii, that sounds pretty normal, right?
Right.
But then in the next breath, you see he's deep into online discussions about the war in Ukraine. He even flew there to participate in a pro-Ukraine rally. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
It is a lot. And I think it highlights the complexities of individual motivations these days, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
Someone can be, deeply affected by a conflict overseas, but also at the same time running a local business, right?
Right.
These aren't mutually exclusive things.
Right.
And I think what's key for us here as we try to, understand Ruth is that he's not just this one thing or that.
Right. And it's not even as simple as picking a side politically, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the article mentions he voiced support for both Trump and Biden at different points.
Yeah.
He even donated to some Democratic candidates.
Right.
So how do we square that with him potentially targeting a former president from the opposing party?
Yeah, this is where I think, those traditional profiling methods, right? They really struggle because we're looking for the consistency.
Right.
We expect those clear lines, right? Like, okay, you're in this camp, you're in that camp.
Minutes or that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But human behavior rarely works that way.
Right.
It's entirely possible to, hold, I think, conflicting views, to feel drawn to certain policies of one party, but then maybe admire the leadership style of another.
That's true. I guess we all have those internal contradictions from time to time.
Yeah.
But then there's this other detail that really jumps out, and it's this. His past run-in with the law in North Carolina. Back in 2002, he was convicted of possessing what they call, get this, a weapon of mass destruction. The article specifically says it was a pipe bomb.
Okay.
And that's not just like a youthful indiscretion. That raises some serious red flags.
It does. And I think it really underscores the need for us to look at the totality of someone's history, right?
Yeah.
And not just their current online persona or their stated political affiliations, right? Because those things can be fluid.
Right.
But when you see something like this, Ruth's past actions, even decades ago, I think it gives us a glimpse at least into his capacity for violence, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of his more recent political leanings or online activities.
Right.
So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as we're, looking at this case and trying to understand, what led to this event.
Okay, so we started to unpack Ryan Wesley Ruth, this picture of him as best we can.
Yeah.
At least from what we have. But to really get a handle on this, to get into the weeds of it, I think we need to shift gears a little bit and look at how this thing actually went down. Because the AP article lays it out like almost minute by minute,
Right.
And I got to say, it's a nail biter.
Yeah. No, and it really highlights, I think, when you're talking about security, especially at this level, the challenges that are involved, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got a former president, high value target in security terms, right?
Right.
Spending the day at a golf course.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a location that's almost designed to be open and accessible. It's not like you can just lock down the entire perimeter, right?
Right.
And that's what, I got to be honest with you, that's one of the things in this article where I found myself sort of like scratching my head a little bit, because it says he allegedly camped out near the golf course for, get this, almost half a day?
Oh, wow.
12 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, even with, I'm sure there's a reduced security detail for former president, but still, I mean, you've got Secret Service, you've got,
Right.
how do you miss someone lurking around for that long?
Well, and that's the thing, right? When we talk about security, it's not about this sort of like 100% impenetrability, because that's virtually impossible.
Right.
It's really about layers, right? It's about minimizing risk as much as possible and then responding effectively when something does manage to slip through those cracks, you know? Okay, so walk us through that. Something did slip through the cracks. What do we know about the attempt itself? How did this all unfold?
So from what we gather in the article, it seems that Ruth was positioned with pretty clear line of sight, actually, to the clubhouse, rifle aimed, ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that it was just, really by chance, or maybe not chance, but, a Secret Service agent, luckily, spotted him and reacted immediately, fired their own weapon, and it seems like that disrupted whatever Ruth was about to do, prevented him from actually getting a shot off. But I mean, talk about a close call.
See, and that's what gets me. It's like even just recounting it now, it's like my heart skips a beat a little bit.
Okay.
Because you realize how easily this could have been a completely different story.
Absolutely.
Like utterly tragic,
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to, the incredible pressure that these agents are under, every single day that they're on the job, right? I mean, they train for this. This is what they do. But the weight of that responsibility to protect a life in literally a split second,
Right.
It's immense, and thankfully in this case, it seems like, their training kicked in, their quick thinking, it probably saved lives.
Right.
But you can't overstate how intense a situation like that must be.
The article also mentioned that when they finally apprehended Ruth, by the way, they caught him in a different county. So the guy took off running. But when they called him, they found some stuff on him. And one of the things that they found was a digital camera, which, I don't know, that struck me as particularly odd. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for sure without, more information, but it does suggest to me it suggests a level of premeditation, of planning, right? Yeah. Was he hoping to document this,
Right.
Was this something that he wanted to be, I don't know, disseminated, shared? Did he have some kind of message that he was hoping to get across?
Right. Wow.
We may never know for sure, but it's those little details that, again, add these layers of complexity to what is already a very perplexing case.
Yeah. It's one thing to sort of wrap our heads around, like, okay, what happened that day at the golf course, the who and the how of it all.
Yeah.
But then there's this whole other level to this thing, right? Like the ripple effect.
Oh, yeah.
The political fallout, which, as the AP article points out, I mean, that was almost immediate.
It's it's like someone tossed a lit match into a fireworks factory, right?
Right.
You already have this incredibly volatile political climate, deeply divided, a lot of distrust, and then this event happens.
Right.
And it's almost impossible to separate the two.
Right. And the article talks about how, Trump, almost immediately takes to social media.
Right.
At first, it's just, confirming he's safe, praising the Secret Service, which,
yeah, standard,
expected, right? But then he pivots hard and really puts the blame for this squarely on Biden and Harris.
Yeah, and this is where I think it gets really, really interesting, right? Because, he's essentially arguing that their past statements about him,
right,
about him being a threat to democracy, their rhetoric in general, that it created this climate where this kind of attack was almost inevitable.
That it incited this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which I guess feels a little ironic considering, Trump's own history with, shall we say, strong language.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's been accused of the very same thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, using his platform to encourage violence against his opponents. I mean, it's this,
It's a pattern.
It's a pattern, yeah. And it really highlights, I think, this incredibly complex and frankly very difficult debate that we're having as a society about, where do we draw the line between political speech
right,
and actual incitement?
When does a strongly worded critique become a call to action?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, when does holding someone accountable for their words, when does that veer into censorship? It's such a minefield.
It is a minefield, and I think this event, unfortunately has only made that path through that minefield even more treacherous.
It's funny. As I was reading this article, I don't know, I kept sort of thinking about those, like, those butterfly effect scenarios, right?
Yeah.
Like what if this, as crazy as it sounds, what if this actually has some sort of chilling effect on political discourse in general?
Yeah.
You know, like, will people, especially those with dissenting views, will they be less likely to speak out,
Uh-huh.
fearing that they'll be accused of inciting violence themselves?
Yeah, no, it's a real concern, and it cuts both ways, right?
Right.
Because you also have those who, might see this and use it as justification to further demonize their opponents, right? To point to an event like this and say, see, this is proof that they're dangerous, that they're unhinged, and it
Yeah.
just feeds into this cycle.
No, it's cycle of fear.
Exactly, a fear of division that we're seeing, I think, escalating all around us.
And it's not just talk. This isn't just like, playing out on social media or cable news, right? I mean, the AP article even mentions that a congressional task force
Yeah.
has, demanded a briefing from the Secret Service.
Right.
I mean, this could have real implications for how political figures, especially someone as polarizing as Trump, how they are protected moving forward.
Absolutely. This could lead to, increased security measures, which,
Yeah.
on the one hand makes sense, right? I mean, we absolutely need to make sure that we're protecting public figures from legitimate threats.
Right.
But it also raises these concerns about access and transparency.
Right.
Right. I mean, how do you balance that need for security with, with the principles of an open society, of access to our leaders?
So where does this leave us then? I mean, we've got this deeply unsettling event. We've got this suspect who really just defies easy categorization. We've got this political climate that feels like, one spark away from just like an inferno. And we've got all these unanswered questions about free speech and security and what political discourse even looks like, moving forward.
It's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. It really is.
It really is.
But if there's one thing I hope you take away from our deep dive today, it's that, this event, as shocking as it is, it didn't happen in a vacuum, right?
Right.
This is a symptom of I think much larger issues that we're grappling with, as a society, and how we choose to move forward, how we address those issues. I think that's the real question, isn't it?
It is. And it's the question I think we all have a stake in answering,
I think so.
Well, on that note, that's going to do it for this deep dive. I want to thank you, as always, for lending your expertise to this. It's always a fascinating conversation.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.